People, next Wednesday at 7:30, you're going to get out on your doorstep, you're going to clap, you're going to cheer, you're going to bang your drums, you're going to bang your band lids together, and whatever noise you can make in support of your human rights and in honour of the people who fought for those rights and to establish them. Because those rights are our inheritance, they are our heritage, and those rights are a vaccination against fascism. And what we are approaching now, what we are living under right now, and what's going to get worse and worse and worse is fascism. Okay? And this video, yes, I'm going to cover a little bit of something that I've covered in a previous video in order to bring home the full points in this much shorter video. But by the end of this video, you will realise in no uncertain terms why we need to stand up for our human rights. Because they've got us all under lockdown, there's nothing we can do. I'm certainly not going to advise people to break the law and put themselves at risk of getting arrested or even of spreading this virus, which actually is a minimal threat. And I'm going to show that to you now. But we do need to show this government that if they start trying to take away our human rights from us, they really are playing with fire. Okay? Now, to start with, is this that I shared in a previous video. This is the type of vaccine that they're working on. Gene therapy vaccines. That snips out bits of our DNA. Okay? And the idea is that the DNA rewrites itself, including instructions about how to deal with whichever pathogen the vaccination is for. In this experiment, it was immunodeficiency disease. Okay? Now, this was from 2003, and what happened was they tested 5 people. One obviously given a placebo, okay? But the 4 people that received the full-on treatment, very likely by vaccine because it's retrovirally mediated transfer, okay? So it was mediated through a virus of this gene to snip at our DNA. So of the first 4 successfully treated patients, 3 continue to do well 3.5 years later. Why are they still studying them 3.5 years later, if they all did really well? Oh, because after 30 months, 2.5 years, one of the patients developed lymphocytosis, leukemia. And they know that it was through the treatment because they tried it again and it was confirmed in 4 additional patients with the same illness. Now, imagine that immunodeficiency disease was instead COVID-19. And after a few months, they're like, hey, we've cured it. Everybody that's had it, yeah, they're fine. And 2.5 years later, 1/4 of the population come down with leukemia. That's why severe combined, you know, a serious adverse event after successful gene therapy. Successful gene therapy, serious adverse event. Why is it so serious? Because it does represent 1/4 of the people vaccinated. And they're talking about vaccinating the whole country with forced vaccinations. And you know, whether they use this kind of therapy or any other vaccine, whatever vaccine they create, a few months is not good enough. A year isn't good enough. 2 years isn't good enough. You need at least 5-6 years to be sure that a vaccine is safe. Now, what we are dealing with here, okay, from the CDC, this is from Last American Vagabond. Here we go. The overall death rate for COVID-19 and under its most likely scenario, the number is 0.26%. That's the overall death rate. Officials estimate that a 0.4% fatality rate among those who are symptomatic and project a 35% rate of asymptomatic cases among those infected, which drops the overall infection rate to just 0.26%. So we're dealing with a very minimal risk. We're dealing with a strain of flu that, unlike many other strains of flu out there, actually has least impact on children and younger people, healthier adults. Because flu kills people of all ages every year. Yes, mostly elderly people, people with underlying health conditions. The fact is, we know that they're lying to us about this coronavirus tests, because they're testing for coronavirus. Because according to this government, okay, this lying, thieving, criminal, fraudulent government, coronavirus now means COVID-19. There you go. Coronavirus means severe acute respiratory syndrome, coronavirus 2, COVID-19. They've literally redefined medical terminology to claim that a word that applies to a variety of colds and flu now applies exclusively to a new virus, coronavirus 2, SARS, when it doesn't. Legally, medically, it doesn't. But they're testing people for coronavirus and then assuming that they have COVID-19. People showing signs of a cold are told not to go to the doctor. You lock yourself up in your home, you've got coronavirus. And then people believe that they've got COVID-19 when they could just have a common cold or any strain of flu. That is a serious level of control. And it is a reversal of the law. Because what they're doing is assuming that people are guilty. And doing absolutely nothing and giving them no means whatsoever to prove that they're innocent. Because it's not like people can say, oh, well, look, you know, test me to prove I have got COVID-19. They haven't got a test. They're not doing tests for COVID-19. They're doing tests for coronavirus. Because apparently, according to this criminal cabal government at number 10, coronavirus now means COVID-19. People, this is outrageous. And now they're telling us, okay, go and check it in the media. They're telling us that we probably won't be able to end lockdowns or social distancing until a virus is produced. What, so we're going to be on lockdown for 5 to 6 years? Because I tell you now, Boris Johnson, and I tell you now, every single medic in this country, you are not going to put our children at risk from bloody experimental vaccines that could cause far more damage than the risk presented by coronavirus. Any strain of coronavirus, be it new or otherwise. You are not going to do it because it is an infringement against our rights and it is a crime against humanity to put that many people at risk from experimental vaccines when we know the dreadful damages that can happen. They're talking about vaccine passports. Okay? They've been planning this since 2018. Vaccination passports. Here you go. This isn't fake news. This isn't conspiracy theory. This is blooming fact. You can read the entire report here. I'll leave you the link. This is what it was doing. This was the emphasis. You know, examine the feasibility of developing a common vaccination card passport for EU citizens. Develop EU guidance for establishing comprehensive electronic immunisation information systems. They're talking about everybody having tracers and trackers on the phone. They're even talking about tagging us like criminals. And this, here we have, oh, Dominic Cummings very kindly stepped forward to play the leading role in the latest media psyop. Breaking the rules. Look, people, look how serious it is when you get in your car and drive to go and see relatives to get care for your child during the lockdown. Expect police on your door. Expect mass public outcry and condemnation. Just to ram it home to people how serious it is when you break these lockdown rules. That suddenly it's the crime of a century because a man, perhaps with a common cold, has gone to visit his family to get care for his child. You know, yes, police should be knocking on Dominic Cummings' door, the door of number 10, for criminal investigations into, like, for example, lawful suspicion related to a rigged election. Because I still find it hard to believe that the majority of people in this country, by a landslide, voted for a man who had to hide in a fridge. I mean, who makes a man who can't even face the press, has to hide in a fridge? Who votes for him to be Prime Minister of the whole country? And his very nefarious, dubious sidekick, Dominic Cummings, who was elected by who? Nobody. What is he even doing in office? Do you really believe that he broke the rules? That he didn't do it completely deliberately in order to reinforce the severity of risks people face now when they break the rules and how the law's going to come down on them? And they're talking now about, you know, getting much sterner and stricter with the fines and even imprisonment for people that break the rules. Because that's how it starts, doesn't it? In any partnership people get into, and the relationship with somebody who's, you know, starts off a bit telling the partner, you can't do this, you can't do that. Next minute there's a slap. Next minute it's a punch. Next minute it's you're being kicked and beaten, locked in a room. Slowly, slowly catch your monkey. Till what? We're all at the point of the gun under martial law. Come December, heading towards the cliff of a hard no-deal Brexit. This time next year, we could all be queuing up with our social distancing for our very expensive rations under point of a gun. That is what we are looking at. And facing forced vaccination of experimental vaccines that could literally kill a quarter of the population. No, no, no. It isn't going to happen. We've got evidence of the planning of this. I thought Britain was out of the EU. Oh, but we're still going to have the vaccination passport, aren't we? What? For a risk that's what? 0.26%, not 1%, not 3%, not 2%. And now Boris Johnson has even stated publicly, okay, that, you know, come September, November time, we probably will have to have another lockdown to stop people catching any flu, because even regular flu now is a risk to the NHS. What? Since when? Since when did we establish an NHS in order for people to be told that your personal freedoms, you are not allowed to enjoy your human rights because you're going to protect the NHS by not getting ill? Well, what is the point of having an NHS then in the first place if we're all meant to protect it by not getting ill? It's completely ridiculous. Why do you think this grand jury has set up here? Michael of Benicia, listen to him, read him, check him out for the news, right? He knows what he's talking about. Turn these off. We know the liars. We saw what they did to Corbyn. Do you really think, people, that the media are suddenly on our side? Imagine if Boris Johnson had stepped forward and pronounced a lockdown. Such an unpopular Prime Minister. Oh yeah, the public would have been against it. The public would have been resentful. That's why he didn't announce the lockdown. He said the opposite, so the media could play devil's advocate on behalf of the public. Oh, give us a lockdown. Oh, he's going to kill you people. It's really serious. Playing games, psyop games with us. But I tell you now, this coronavirus bill is no game. And that is why a grand jury in Britain has got together to look at the evidence, and they found evidence, prima facie evidence of pandemic fraud. And why? Because this bill is so serious. It gives them rights, literally, to force you to have experimental, even cruel and callous treatment, to detain you, whip you off to an isolation centre on the strength that you've tested positive for so much as the common cold. And you have no way whatsoever to prove that you do not have COVID-19. Your means of to be able to prove your innocence have been taken out of your hands, and you have been assumed by the state to be guilty because you sneezed. You're showing symptoms of a common cold. You're showing symptoms of a coronavirus, and coronavirus means COVID-19. These are lies. These are propaganda lies. And we know for a fact they've been bumping the figures up. As has been happening in America, is happening here in Britain. Everybody who dies, who tests positive for any coronavirus is being assumed to have COVID-19. If that person dies, that's what gets put on the death certificate. I know this for a fact. We all know it. We've all got relatives, people who've lost people recently of cancer, heart attacks. People who've been denied healthcare because of coronavirus to protect the NHS, okay? Then they die and they get added to the list of COVID-19 deaths. That is outrageous. Like literally driving people to illness and death and then using those people to ramp up the figures in order to justify putting the public at even more greater risk of experimental vaccines. And at the helm of it all, a known eugenicist, depopulation man, paedophile pal, Bill Gates. The children are most of all at risk. Because children, you see, although they're legally defined as minor human beings in this sick, disgusting world, children are developing human beings. And that's how they grow strong into adults, because every second, every minute, every hour of the day, their bodies are developing, and their immune system is a prime feature of their development into healthy adults. And a child's immunity needs time in the external world, needs to mix with other children and other people, that their immune system gets bombarded on a daily basis with all the pathogens and whatever that's out there, and they fight it off every day, and their immune system grows stronger. That has been arrested, and they want to unleash the children now into the public. Probably now it will be September when the vast majority of children go back to school, just as the winter season has started, with their impaired immunities, having spent months locked up, months away from everybody, perhaps trapped in family homes where there's domestic acrimony, perhaps even violence and abuse, and the stress of parents who've lost jobs, lost businesses, the stress of poverty, all of which equally impairs immunity. Far from protecting us, people's immunity, they've damaged our immunity and made everybody more susceptible to every strain of flu come this winter. Because as applies to children's immunity, applies equally, albeit to a lesser degree, to adults. And in America now, they're making a big fuss and hoo-ha. Apparently, 100,000 people have died of COVID-19, when we know for a fact that even the White House itself has stated that anybody who dies, if someone dies with COVID-19, we're counting that as COVID-19. That's a COVID-19 death. This is fraud. Look at the winter deaths. Nearly 50,000. Look, people. This was from 2015. I did a historical search. They're going on about, 100,000 deaths in America. Look how many people die in America every year. 2,813,503 people die in America every year. So how many is that a month? Well, 100,000. Actually, the figures must be low this year for mortality rates. And when we know for a fact that the majority of those people that are on the COVID-19 death list haven't actually died of COVID-19, may not have even shown any symptoms of COVID-19, but they tested positive for a coronavirus, so they're assumed to have COVID-19, and they get added to the death list. And then your sheepdog media, your complicit, disgusting propaganda, Nazi propaganda merchants, because that is all you can call them when they are promoting stuff like this, ultimately. Oh, they're suddenly showing pictures of bodies, rows and rows of bodies wrapped in shrouds to ram it home to people about the severity of the situation and why we need this lockdown and why you can't see your family and why you can't go and have a drink with your neighbour or go down to your local pub, or why you can't and must have all your human rights stripped, and why you've got to be injected with Bill Gates' experimental vaccine, and why you might have to wear a tag if you get tested positive for so much as a common cold and be treated like a criminal. And why you should have a tracing apps on your phone so that you can be monitoring everybody you've had contact with. Why they might have to come and take your children from your home because you've tested positive for a common cold. Why you're going to be heading towards the cliff of a no-deal Brexit. And the horror that will impose. No medicines, no food, literally everything rationed. And very expensive as well, because it'll all be coming from America. Oh, well, we haven't even got a trade deal with America sorted out yet, apparently. But don't worry, I think we're going to swap our NHS. Now we've protected it by all relinquishing our human rights. I tell you, people, you're going to get out on Wednesday at 7:30. You're going to clap and cheer and shout and make a noise to deliver a message to that criminal cabal at number 10 that we are standing firm by our human rights and do not push us, okay? Because great sacrifices were made for those rights. It took how many centuries of oppression? 2 world wars to establish those human rights. They are our inheritance, they are our legacy, and no virus is going to take them away. And the media, all of this coverage of Dominic Cummings now, it is literally straining at a gnat, getting the whole public behind straining at a gnat in order to swallow the camel. And I tell you now, the gnat in life will swallow, as I've said before, you'll swallow a few gnats. But I tell you now, the camels will kill us. And this is the camel. A vaccine produced in less than 5 years is a camel. It presents a very serious risk. In this case, 1/4 of the people tested with this vaccine after 2.5 years of it being successful. Oh, suddenly, 1/4 who get given this treatment develop leukemia. What's it going to be if after 2.5 years, a quarter of us are dying of leukemia or whatever damage this vaccine has caused? Or maybe in 3 years or 4 years. And what? To protect us from a minimal risk? A minimal risk? Okay? And we know that they're fraudulently lying about the figures. And meanwhile, look what's going on in the world while everybody is distracted with coronavirus, coronavirus, coronavirus. They've just burned the wheat crop in Syria. They're putting billions in the so-called underdeveloped countries. They're facing famine. We're talking about whole-scale murder of people because directly of this pandemic, because of the distraction. But the people in a lot of countries are now facing famine because of trade closing down, because of the coronavirus. Millions of children facing famine. Because we in the West are so terrified. We're so terrified of a minor risk from a new flu virus that millions have been condemned to famine in the underdeveloped nations. You get out on Wednesday, you stand, you clap, you cheer for our human rights. And I'll tell you now, Boris Johnson, we are not leaving the EU with a no deal, okay? You are not going to kill more people now by depriving us of our vital foods and medicines that we get through the EU deals. You are going to establish our human rights. This coronavirus bill is going to be scrapped for the act of tyranny and nonsense that it is. That is what is going to happen. And we are going to demand investigations into this last general election, okay, that we strongly suspect was rigged, that the postal vote was rigged. We want to know how Dominic Raab and Laura Kussenberg knew the results of the postal vote before even the day of the GE. How she could be sat talking about how it's looking really bad for Labour, how Dominic Raab knew that. What connections the Tories have with IDOCs, what connections they have with privatised healthcare, and what is going on. We have a right to know because that is a democracy. And a virus has no right. What everything men like my granddad fought and died for, that people like my grandparent, my grandmothers struggled and suffered so hard for to establish, is all going to be wiped away because of a new virus? That has a 0.4% death rate among those infected? When we're dealing with such levels of fraud? And even appropriating medical terminology and twisting it and to apply in order to, justify stripping everybody of our rights to come and remove children from our home? No, 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 no to all of those. And you media, you are scum. Turn them off, people. Stop listening to them. Listen to UK Column. They're giving you the news, the true news on this alleged crisis. But I tell you now, it is a crisis. It's a crisis against our human rights. It's a crisis against our economy. This is an attack orchestrated by the New World Order. And look, they've been planning it for how bloody long? Stand up for your human rights. Do it. Next Wednesday, if you care about your child and you care about your children's future, you will be on your doorstep clapping and cheering for your human rights. We will deliver a message to number 10 and let them, that criminal cabal squatting there, understand once and for all that you are not going to deny us our human rights and you're going to end this lockdown ASAP, because our children are going to have a summer and they're going to build up their immunity and we all are ready for winter. And that's the way it's going to be, okay? And that way we will be protecting the NHS.